You Love Me by GML001. Bum struggled against the door for all he was worth, dark eyes wild with panic. Sangwoo let him have his moment before using enough force to slam the door wide open with his shoulder, nearly breaking Bum's delicate nose in the process. A cry of alarm, one that didn't grate on Sangwoo's nerves. Finally. Inhaling deeply, Sangwoo crowded the smaller man further into the apartment, kicking the door shut and locking it as he moved with him. He wanted to grab Bum, hold him, kiss his chapped lips until they bled, choke him, make him hurt and cry and beg. Sangwoo wanted to cut the hickeys littering his neck and shoulders right off his body. Any portion of Bum that bore a mark Sangwoo hadn't been the cause of needed to go. Bum had backed himself into a corner, eyes wide, clearly overstimulated, affected so intensely by Sangwoo's presence alone. Smiling, Sangwoo reached out to touch a pale cheek. You moved beyond the staircase. You crossed the line. Bum shook his head furiously, as strong a no as any, Adam's apple bobbing as he struggled to swallow.
I got through a window. I never moved past the stairs. I even stayed on the opposite side of town, away from the stairs.
Bum's voice shook stronger with every word, but he leaned into Sangwoo's fleeting touch. Sangwoo remained silent for a moment before laughter, nearly hysterical, bubbled up and out. He waited until Bum relaxed, as well as he could before lashing out, fingers wrapping around his delicate throat, effectively and harshly cutting off his breathing. Sangwoo leaned closer, his displeasure running strong. You still left. How you left doesn't really matter. And the videos? He released Bum only after the other man stopped clawing at his hand. Bum gagged, coughed, worked desperately for the oxygen he needed so badly. Sangwoo remained patient, giving him the time he needed.
Sungbae's a police officer.
Bum pointed out instead when he was done heaving. Sangwoo smiled and pulled Bum close as gently as he could, holding him against him with a hand on the back of Bum's neck. Bum cringed. Suspicion, confusion, and a trace amount of hope was his response to Sangwoo's incredibly mixed signals. Your Sungbae is a police officer who won't be missed. Leaning down to press his lips against Bum's ear, he added, no one is gonna miss you after he's gone. Whatever arrogance Bum had possessed behind a camera was long gone, replaced by the Bum Sangwoo wanted, maybe the Bum he'd had a part in creating. Pulling back slightly, he moved his grip from the back of Bum's neck to the side, digging his thumb into one of the many marks left behind by Sungbae. If Sangwoo couldn't yet cut them off, he'd make some of his own. Bum jerked, cried out softly, but didn't move to pull away. He gripped Sangwoo's wrist as tight as Sangwoo assumed he could, a slight tremor running through his hands. Up on your high horse behind a camera. Sangwoo's lips twitched against the oncoming smile when Bum flinched and eyes widened in realization. You kept whining about how I didn't touch you. Raising his voice in mocking imitation, Sangwoo continued, you never touched me, I could have loved you, what the fuck? So arrogant! He laughed. Digging his nail into the small bruise elicited another cry, and what would no doubt be Bum's first apology of many.
I'm sorry.
I'm touching you now, I touched you then. Gentling his grip, Sangwoo moved both hands to Bum's face, forcing eye contact and calling back his patience. It seemed slightly endless for Bum, he thought. He could lose his patience, of course, but it was easy to get back when Bum stared at him like that. What wasn't enough? Bum blushed furiously, eyes flicking away and back from Sangwoo a couple times. He gaped like a fish, struggling for words and settled on none. Where's the cocky bastard behind the camera, Bum? He asked softly, though he still wanted an answer to his first question. He could rip the words from Bum later. As it was, he had a limited amount of time before he had a part to play.
Sungbae?
No, you, Sangwoo corrected, applying some pressure to Bum's face to regain eye contact. You were very clever. I'm sure if you'd shifted the camera slightly to the right in your last one, I never would have found you. Bum stared back silently, stupidly. His uniform was on the floor by the bed, topped by a badge. It wasn't too hard after that, to know he was young. I'd seen his body. Would have thought you'd go for an older one, but... Sangwoo trailed off and shrugged, watching as realization dawned on Bum's expression. His knees gave out and he caught himself on Sangwoo.
You weren't supposed to know yet.
Yet? Bum let out a strangled groan. Ragged nails digging into Sangwoo's biceps.
I wasn't ready. A couple more weeks, then you would have...
Sangwoo stared at him curiously when he cut himself off. Was he hiding something? He could keep his secrets for now. Soon, Sangwoo decided he wouldn't have the chance to keep secrets.
Sangwoo, why did you look for me?
A trace amount of resolve seeped into Bum's posture, tightening his previously quivering body, hardening his expression. That could not last. Having planned on answering honestly, Sangwoo decided against that in the face of Bum's boldness. Better to bring him down a peg or two. He could indulge in imagination. Pressing Bum back against the wall and bringing their bodies closer, Sangwoo stared down at him as seriously as he could manage. Because I love you. The words felt weird coming out of his mouth, and certainly they weren't true. Love would not be the name for what Sangwoo felt for Bum. He wanted Bum, wanted to have him close, because he settled the nightmares. Wanted to build him up, then break him down so quickly it would make Bum sick. Whatever that was, he didn't think it was love. Of course, if the party bitch he'd picked up had answered him when he'd asked, maybe he'd have a better idea of it. The look on his face was absolutely priceless. The shock, the hope, a much better look on Bum than any other girl he'd brought back. Only because he could shatter that hope again and again and again, and he'd never get bored of it. And Bum would never learn to stop. Leaning down to press his lips to Bum's forehead, Sangwoo also let the grip on Bum's face become a softer caress. That's what you wanted me to say, isn't it? Sangwoo bit back his laughter and let Bum jerk and stumble away from him. The pain in his expression better than anything a more physical blow could have caused. We need to talk. I'll be here a while. Get me something to drink. For a moment, Bum looked ready to argue. He braced himself, small hands curled into fists, knuckles bone white. Then he nodded, sagged, and slipped by Sangwoo like a skittish cat. Sangwoo explored half-heartedly while Bum set to work. The flat was small, the only personal items appearing to be Sungbae's, and even the pictures and decor were vague, only there to fill in some space. He'd settled and relaxed into the cheap couch by the time Bum stepped into the room, his hands shaking as he offered him a glass of water.
We have...
Bum murmured.
I was supposed to go shopping yesterday, but I was...
His gaze drifted back and forth across the room before locking on his tightly clasped hands.
Busy.
Busy doing what? Following me around? Sangwoo sneered into his glass. At Bum's rising blush, he laughed softly. Thoroughly pleased. For someone who doesn't like me very much, you're pretty obsessed. Frustration, desperation, or maybe anger flared in Bum's murky gaze and he shook his head.
Because I don't get you,
he ground out. After he took a moment to breathe and settle himself, he added flatly,
but I'm about to try.
Too late, Sangwoo realized as he finished half the glass. Water alone didn't taste like this did, and Bum's extreme anxiety, his shifting, eyes wild, his moods, that brought back a memory. You little fuck! Sangwoo surged to his feet but stumbled. On the verge of collapsing, he tried to reach for Bum, who still sat passive on the couch, but his body wouldn't respond to his will and drowsiness dulled the faint anger.
I'm sorry, Sangwoo.
Bum didn't seem too sorry, but Sangwoo was hardly in a position to say so. Chapter 7. Sangwoo woke slowly, his mouth as dry as cotton and a familiar song playing softly through the flat. He kept his eyes closed, breathing deep and even, as he processed his surroundings. He was definitely handcuffed and on a bed. Sangwoo heaved a sigh, tugged idly at the cuffs around his wrists, and opened his eyes to find Bum slumped in a chair at the end of the bed. A knife dangled between his fingers, eyes downcast, for once his expression slack. Fucking piece of shit. Sangwoo ground his teeth against a building outburst. Antagonizing Bum wouldn't give him the upper hand.
I listened to this song when Sungbae is about to come home.
Bum started, his voice flat. His eyes rolled past Sangwoo to settle on a clock.
About an hour now. Little early, but why was it always killing me softly?
He snorted and shook his head.
You were never soft.
Bum, take the cuffs off of me. Sangwoo snapped, watching curiously as Bum stood. Something was off. Or something had flipped. The same something that revealed itself in Bum's videos. So, when Bum thought he was safe, he could be brave.
No, if I do that, you'll just hurt me.
Bum cooed, shaking with strained laughter. Fair point. Sangwoo conceded with a nod. Bum grimaced.
You're always so...
His fingers clenched around the knife and then he moved forward, leaning on the bed before crawling up to Sangwoo. It would have been so easy to kick him off. Bum was not strong, and even straddling his waist, Sangwoo had no doubt he'd be light enough to throw off with a twist of his hips. But Sangwoo kept still, allowing Bum to settle on his thighs and place the knife carefully on his chest.
Don't let it fall,
he murmured. Bum wouldn't do anything with it, not to him. He'd had so many chances over the months he'd been in Sangwoo's care. He wouldn't do anything now. Sungbae takes care of me. Bum started, voice tight, forced to his lips. He treats me nicely, tells me he loves me, and I think he means it. Really? Because it seems like you think everyone means it. Sangwoo pointed out, smiling when Bum's eyes flashed angrily. Was it before or after he said it that you let him fuck you? Or did you fuck him so he would say it? And if his love means so much to you, why have you continued to put so much into me? Bum moved explosively and violently, snatching the knife up and embedding it into the mattress by Sangwoo's head, rage filling his features. Oh, close one, he mumbled. Why do you care? Bum's ragged shout emphasized the silence that followed, made Sangwoo too aware of his own shock. The sound of fabric ripping followed the knife's difficult journey down through the junction of Sangwoo's shoulder and neck. He watched, and when the blade was close enough to his skin, he looked back to Bum. If you won't love me, he murmured, intent on the knife's staggering progress. Don't make me bleed, Sangwoo warned softly. The knife nicked him and Bum gasped, horrified, and jerked the knife out of the mattress away from Sangwoo. Apologies spilled from Bum until tears filled his eyes. I'm sorry. They didn't spill over just yet. You made me feel special, he whispered, voice breaking, attention now split between speaking and dabbing up the small amount of blood with a sheet, dazed and frantic. You kept me alive. Only me. You let me cook for you. Well, Sangwoo trailed off. He'd have to reconsider letting Bum be in charge of consumables. You let me out of the basement, Bum cried, and the knife returned, pressing lightly against Sangwoo's throat. I won't go back to the basement, he hissed. Take the cuffs off and you won't have to. Bum froze, indecision the source of his hesitancy. Eyeing Sangwoo warily, he tilted his head. No more basement? No more basement, Sangwoo promised. Bum sat back, dropping the knife to the side but still within reach. He twitched as he reached for Sangwoo's face, considering him carefully before deciding he could touch. His fingers were cold and clammy. Sangwoo refused to respond to his touch. What wasn't enough? Bum murmured after a moment. It took Sangwoo a minute to realize he'd backtracked. I wasn't enough. I cooked for you, cleaned for you, did everything. Bum leaned forward, fingers curling into Sangwoo's shirt and tugging at the material. Sangwoo grimaced as he stretched and wrinkled. And I would have done anything for you, Bum whispered. But you kept setting me up to fail. Kept putting me back in that basement. Kept putting other people down there with me. The tears finally spilled and he pressed his hands over his eyes, trying to breathe evenly and failing incredibly. Why wasn't I enough? Sangwoo considered Bum seriously for a moment. He bit his cheek to hold back a small smile, excited by his newest idea. He glanced quickly at the clock. 20 minutes. Sangwoo repeated himself slowly and emphatically. Take the cuffs off, and I'll never put you in the basement again. You'll be enough. You promise? Bum whispered, peering down at Sangwoo through his fingers. Promise. It took several tries for Bum to actually unlock the cuffs. Sangwoo's first instinct was to lash out, wrap his fingers around Bum's neck, break him into little pieces for the liberty he'd taken. Instead, he breathed the rage away and stretched his shoulders out, rolled his wrists, trying to ease the tension and aches. Sangwoo froze when Bum folded, pressing his face against his chest. He pursed his lips before wrapping his arms slightly around Bum, allowing him his moment. He was so small and bony, all ridges and sharp angles under the shirt that seemed to swallow him. So delicate, so easy to manipulate, so obedient. Even terrified, heartbroken, crying his pain softly against Sangwoo, he would still do what Sangwoo said. Running his hand up Bum's back, taking a moment to feel intrigued by the shudder that elicited, and into his hair Sangwoo murmured, Before we can go, we have to deal with Sungbae. Bum convulsed in his arms, head snapping up so quickly Sangwoo barely had time to move in order to avoid the hit. Sungbae? Sangwoo offered him as reassuring a smile as he could as he reached up, cupping Bum's face in his hands. He won't let you leave with me, and he can't know. Bum shook his head and Sangwoo tightened his grip in response, pushing his cheeks together and digging his fingers enough to Bum to know refusal was not an option. I can just break up. Sangwoo shook his head, before pulling Bum so close their noses brushed. He smirked when Bum's eyes nearly crossed to lock onto his mouth. Break up with your boyfriend to leave with your cousin? He brushed his thumbs across Bum's cheekbones. He'll never buy it. He doesn't like me. Sangwoo found he couldn't resist teasing a little. As lightly as he kissed Bum, so light it was practically chaste. He held Bum back harshly, tangling his fingers in inky hair, nearly ripping strands out to keep Bum's hunger at bay. While Bum was distracted, eyes squeezed shut and one of the most pathetically needy moans Sangwoo had ever heard escaping him, Sangwoo looked at the clock. 10 minutes. He turned his head away, but Bum only moved to his neck. Instead of the repulsion he expected, Sangwoo sighed, briefly indulging in the heat of Bum's mouth. Bum was not careful, he lacked finesse, but with the thoughts running through his head, he willed the first stirrings of arousal away. Later, when he had Bum alone, safe and sound in his home. Bum. Sangwoo tried pulling fiercely at Bum's hair. A sharp yelp of refusal was his response, so he tried again. Bum. Flipping him with ease, really. Bum was far too light. He shoved Bum's face into the pillows. Bum, listen. Chapter 8. You're too fucking nervous. Sangwoo sighed as he lounged back on the couch. Really, Bum's attitude was killing the build-up. Bum whispered his apology. Sorry, he's just been so nice. Bum murmured, jumping at every noise, sitting stiff on the edge of the couch cushion. Sangwoo scoffed and pushed him closer to Bum, hooking an arm around his shoulder and twirling the few strands of black hair he could reach. He ducked his head and pressed a soft kiss against Bum's neck, keeping the contact light enough to ensure Bum focused on his desire for more. Sangwoo could feel Bum's heartbeat against his lips, spiking as he leaned closer. Can he take care of you like I do? Sangwoo asked, tugging on the strands of hair between his fingers. No. Bum answered on a soft exhalation. Sangwoo nipped his warning when a key rattled in the flat's door and Bum's hand flew to his mouth to hold back a startled shout. Remember, it's for us. He reminded Bum. Too easy. If he had known Bum responded so well to the bare minimum of seduction and flowery words, he wouldn't be in the situation they were in now. This would be a kill he could enjoy. Sungbae had been a nuisance from the start. Too clever for his own good, too blatantly desperate to catch Sangwoo. And then he'd gotten his hands on Bum. Sungbae called out a simple, I'm home, from the entryway, his voice smooth and calm. So strange how different he sounded when rutting like an animal. With Bum. Welcome back. Sangwoo hissed, the jealous anger rising so quickly he found himself taking it out on Bum. Welcome back, Bum responded, voice too obviously filled with fear. Sangwoo scooted away from Bum, only moderately irritated. His excitement couldn't be dampened, however, not when he was so close. Bum? Sungbae came around the corner, curiosity and worry plaguing strong features. The moment his eyes fell on Sangwoo, who only offered a polite smile as his greeting, his body tensed. Sangwoo could practically smell his suspicion. What he wanted from Sungbae, however, was not suspicion. He wanted fear, agony, the understanding that he had signed his fate the moment he had set a target on what was Sangwoo's. Bum? Sungbae repeated again, though his eyes never left Sangwoo. My cousin. Bum started slowly, gesturing to Sangwoo. Sangwoo. We've met. Sangwoo started, wrapping himself in his persona, the act. He stood and stretched, shifting his polite smile to one of gratitude. He helped me clear up a little misunderstanding about a little fender bender, and with his black box, he would have had something to charge Sangwoo with. How stupid, Sangwoo thought. The only person to ever actually have a possible case on me, and he let it go. And he was also concerned enough about my safety over a noise complaint, stopped by to make sure everything was right. Thank you for your concern. Sangwoo finished and moved by him towards the small kitchen. But why are you here? Sungbae asked, eyes narrow, too suspicious. Sangwoo clicked his tongue. I can't visit family? Rolling his eyes over to Bum, he felt his smile grow. Concern, really? I was so worried, you see, that he'd find someone like his uncle. Sangwoo! Touchy. He hummed, but he supposed he could lay off. Teasing the relationship was pointless. It wouldn't exist soon. Sungbae began to hound Bum as soon as Sangwoo ducked into the kitchen, which meant Sangwoo only had a short amount of time to find a decent weapon, preferably something blunt, before Bum cracked. Hey, he called out, interrupting Sungbae's concerned investigation. I also came to borrow some baking supplies. My girlfriend has been into baking lately. You have any baking sheets, pans, rolling pins? Sangwoo asked as he shifted through the cabinets. Can't remember exactly what she said. Sungbae responded after another hiss sentence. Bottom left cupboard. Cheers, Sangwoo thought as he located a rolling pin. Traditional wood, some weight, with enough force he should be able to. Thank you, he said. Bum had done his part, keeping Sungbae with his back to the kitchen. It was too easy to walk up to Sungbae and slam his foot hard against the back of the man's knee. He heard a satisfying pop as he did it, and while it wouldn't break, he'd definitely put the leg out of commission. Sungbae went down with a shout, a curse, and then anger filled him. He tried to look back at Sangwoo, to turn and fight, but that motion was stopped quickly. No. Sangwoo chided, gripping Sungbae's short hair and forcing his head forward. You need to see the man who's really put you in this situation. Crouching down, Sangwoo looked up at Bum while pressing his cheek against Sungbae's. The man was still gasping in pain. Well, tell him, he snapped, looking to Bum with a certain amount of exasperation.
Sangwoo.
Bum choked his name out, turned his attention to him in desperation, his plea blatant. Sangwoo was willing to help push Bum along, but Sungbae moved, trying to lean forward and gain enough momentum to drive his head into Sangwoo's face. Sangwoo moved faster, dropping the rolling pin close to his side and switching to his pocket knife. Smart man, he whispered when Sungbae froze under the blade against his throat. Sangwoo wasn't as generous as Bum with the pressure he applied, digging it in deep enough to break skin. He tossed Bum a look that was not unkind, filled with fondness, and said seriously, "Remember, for us."
For us.
Bum repeated, dazed expression back in place. Sangwoo stood but kept a firm grip on Sungbae's hair. He's a threat. Bum hummed thoughtfully, swayed for a moment, then nodded reluctantly. Sungbae's voice was priceless. Desperate, hurt, afraid, all in one word. All simply heard in the way he stuttered Bum's name.
Bum.
You didn't know? Sangwoo asked. I guess the camera was always well placed, but you still couldn't tell Bum was faking? What he would have given to be able to see Sungbae's expression just then, but he could wait. You planned this? Sungbae choked out. Sangwoo snorted at the presumptuous self-entitlement. Hardly. Bum wanted me jealous. Well, unlucky for you, I'm jealous. Bum's breath hitched at his admission, eyes widening. He was definitely pleased.
The walls are too thin,
Bum whispered, wrapping his arms around himself and slouching, as if the information brought him physical pain.
Bum.
You're right, Sangwoo conceded, throwing Bum a treat, a fond smile and a proud glance. Sangwoo took advantage of Sungbae's distracted pain to let him go, trusting he wouldn't go too far, and grabbing the rolling pin, he tested its weight idly, tossing it from hand to hand before widening his stance and winding up. A soft crack, nothing too damaging, and Sungbae hit the floor. Bum covered his mouth with his hands to muffle a low keen. Sangwoo snapped impatiently at him, gesturing to their burden. Help me get him to the car. Remember, he drank a little too much after his shift at the station. We're helping him to the hospital.
Because he fell and hit his head on the coffee table.
Bum finished with quiet precision, if anyone asks. As Bum struggled to help Sangwoo lift Sungbae, Sangwoo gave him a soft smile and set aside a moment to stroke Bum's cheek. Bum exhaled sharply, surprise lighting his face. And then cautious pride began to take over. So easy. Chapter 9. Sangwoo sighed as he finished chaining Sungbae to the pole. He started shifting, coming to just in time. Adjusting the laptop in front of him, Sangwoo waited until Sungbae was mostly conscious. Rise and shine, princess. He hummed softly, shaking Sungbae until he tried to lunge for him, only to be stopped by the cuffs. Shh. Bum has a message for you. You need to watch it before we start. Sangwoo interrupted. He's much more confident behind a camera, did you know? I'll get him later for it, but right now, the relationship is a little fragile. You sick fuck, Sungbae whispered. I knew it. Shut up, please. Thanks. Now, as I was saying, Bum left you a video. You can watch it. I'll go back upstairs and try to talk him into coming down. Sangwoo continued, resting his elbows on his bent knees and watching Sungbae intently, waiting for him to squirm, join the party, so to speak. He loved the pure pain that glazed his eyes every time Sangwoo spoke Bum's name. See, I promised I wouldn't put him back down here. I guess he didn't realize I meant he wouldn't be back down here as a toy, that he wouldn't be put down here. He could come down on level ground, as a superior, well, your superior. Sangwoo's lips twisted into a rather unpleasant smile. My equal, kind of. He reached out, patting the knee he'd dislocated cheerfully. He can think that. Sungbae held back a scream. He wouldn't be able to do so for long. As Sangwoo stood to go back upstairs, he heard Bum's quiet footfalls starting towards the bedroom, then the familiar pattern of pacing, just above the little hatch at the top of the stairs. Maybe he wouldn't have to talk Bum into it. He'd already tried to explain the circumstances of Bum's return to the basement. After all, Bum was a vital part of his plan. On second thought, Sangwoo settled back down, this time by Sungbae's head, and pressed play. You know, he sent me a few videos. A couple of him following me around, he whispered, side-eyeing Sungbae as he spoke and the video loaded. He wanted to see his reaction. A couple of you two fucking like little bunnies. Fucking disgusting. Sungbae shut his eyes tight, face tightening in pain. He didn't respond. There was only one time where he responded honestly, and that was when you blindfolded him, cuffed him, and gagged him. Sangwoo continued, and guess who he was thinking of? You piece of shit. Sungbae whispered. Sangwoo frowned as the video started, then slapped at Sungbae. Hey, pay attention. Bum is speaking. I'm sorry, Sungbae. Sangwoo, he forced. Shut up. Sangwoo hissed. Bum is speaking. Will I have to gag you too? Sungbae ground his teeth together, his glare hot and full of the hate Sangwoo had felt for him since the first time he'd been threatened. Sangwoo, I loved him. I hate him. Hated him. I'm not sure. Bum groaned and static crackled. But what he wants, we need to be safe, regardless of how I feel. And you're a threat. It's not personal, and it's really, truly my fault, Sungbae. Really, if someone else had noticed me, they would be in the same situation you are, probably. And I didn't mean for you to get caught in the middle. It was a slip-up. I missed something, that's all. Something so little. Sangwoo, he's smart. Talks a lot more in a video, doesn't he? Sangwoo murmured. You just don't know him. Sungbae hissed. Sangwoo only chuckled. Well, if that's what happens as a result of knowing him, I'm glad I don't. Sangwoo gets jealous. Bum spoke the words with sudden reverence, the look on his face one of delight, pure bliss. If Sangwoo had known the news would make Bum so happy, would he still have admitted it? If I had known Sangwoo would get so jealous, I probably wouldn't have involved you, I think. Concern flashed strong across his face. I hope, but... A sudden smile, small but no less twisted. But Sangwoo, to think Sangwoo would do this for me, because of me, get so mad, need me so much. I thought I'd have to send a few more videos before he realized it. Sangwoo frowned at that, put off by Bum's precision, disliking the accuracy of his statement, the simple fact that it was true. So, I'm sorry, Sungbae. It seems like we both fell for the wrong person. Uh-oh, time's up. Sangwoo sighed as the screen went black. He glanced down at Sungbae, curious, unable to comprehend his expression. He's a really good liar, isn't he? Fickle. You give him a few nice words, a kiss, and he's yours. For a moment. I think I just realized he needs that constant affirmation in order to remain docile and obedient. But he's a decent liar regardless. For the first few weeks, I thought he really did love me. Sungbae forced his words out. Who would love you? Sangwoo only laughed, unfazed. Right? It's all fake. Love is fake. He agreed, then clapped his hands and stood up. Now, on to business. Right now, I think Bum is considering coming down. I probably only need to call him. That would be nice. If I kill you, that's okay. You touched what's mine, that pisses me off. But if Bum kills you... He sighed, and bent down to pull Sungbae up and prop him against the pole. That would suck, wouldn't it? He struggled, of course, which Sangwoo had to quickly adapt to. A man close to his own height and weight was much different than a girl, or Bum. I haven't killed a man since my dad... Knew it! Sungbae growled. Well, it was kind of obvious. Sangwoo pointed out, but I'm sure you won't mind if I'm a bit clumsy. He punctuated the word with a punch to Sungbae's nose, enjoying his yelp, and the blood that flowed freely from his nose. Broken, Sangwoo decided. Definitely broken. He'd felt the crack. Maybe out of practice. He suggested while straightening and delivering a sharp kick to his stomach. Even his breath left him. Your knee, hurting all by itself. Sangwoo sighed and turned away to grab the sledgehammer. This might break a bit, by the way. Sungbae screamed. His entire knee shattered. Useless. He stared blindly up at the ceiling. Something dropped at the hatch. Bum, probably. Something he'd been holding. Startled. Ah, shit. Sorry. Looks a bit uneven. Let's level things out. Sangwoo brought the tool down on the other knee. Another ragged cry. Ah! What you do to one side, you must do to another. Sungbae's chest heaved as he fought for breath. Every exhale a quick grunt. Teeth clenched. His pain so obvious now. Would he pass out? And what about your hands? Hands you had all over Bum. My Bum. Sangwoo pointed out. He snorted when Sungbae brought his cuffed hands close to his chest, as if that would stop him. That won't do. He moved around to Sungbae's side and kicked him to the floor, placing one foot on the arm resting on it to pin him there. He brought the handle of the sledgehammer down, eliciting another scream. Ah! 3 fingers snapped. See what touching Bum does to you? Sangwoo asked him softly. Didn't anyone ever tell you it's rude to take others' belongings? Stealing is wrong. Dropping the sledgehammer, the heavy thud making Sungbae flinch. He paused in consideration. Maybe I'll just cut them off. He'd make Sungbae cry yet, make him beg for mercy. How, though? Girls cried when they hurt. What would make Sungbae cry, if not the pain? Sangwoo got his answer a moment later.
Sangwoo?
Voice soft, shaking with uncertainty. Bum stood at the top of the stairs. Sungbae's tears spilled then. Fucking pathetic. Hey, this dumbass really does love you, Bum, Sangwoo told him, kicking Sungbae over so he faced the stairs. He looked up at the smaller man, clenching his teeth against his sudden rage. Tasted so bitter. You sure you didn't just make the wrong choice? Surprise flickered across Bum's face.
Bum.
Shut up, Sungbae. Bum and I are having a conversation right now. I can do the same thing to your head that I did to your knees, Sangwoo pointed out impatiently. He turned his attention back to Bum. So, you want to save him? He thought briefly of the possibility that Bum would say yes, that he would decide Sangwoo was a mistake. He decided he didn't like the way that thought made him feel. Bum crossed his arms, shifting from foot to foot. He looked down for a moment, as if he were debating whether or not to take another step down or retreat.
Do you want me to?
His eyes found Sangwoo again. His mouth fell into a harsh scowl, his need for guidance great. Sangwoo felt his lips twitch into a grin, his insecurity resolved. Crouching down, he heaved Sungbae upright and whispered, "He's mine now. Anything you'd like to say?" Begging probably would have worked a few hours ago. Don't think it will now. Sangwoo groaned when he tried anyway. So stupid. Seemed like he was doing the world a favour with this one. His words seemed to use up a lot of energy. Every time he stopped to breathe, he wheezed. Sweat even trickled down his face.
Bum, if you stay with him, you'll die. He's not capable of love. Of even something as simple as caring about you. For you. Bum shook his head in nearly childlike disagreement. He did take care of me. He helped me take care of myself. And not just me. When he paused, prideful elation passed over his dazed features. I could take care of him. Sangwoo does love me. Sangwoo frowned. Seemed like he was putting a lot of strong words in his mouth. He doesn't get it yet, what he's feeling. Bum amended after a pause, throwing Sangwoo a frustrated, patient, understanding glance. If killing you makes him realize that, if it makes him happy. He bit his lip and looked away. I'm so sorry, Sungbae. I love you, Bum. Sangwoo started, surprised by the shouted declaration. I love you, and you're making a decision based on a foolish belief. You're taking a risk on a psychopath over certainty Sangwoo can't feel. That's enough. Sangwoo snapped as he jerked Sungbae's head back by his chair. He'd have to go soon. The more he spoke, the angrier Sangwoo became, frustrated by his own confusing emotions in response to the words. Looking up at Bum, who had taken 3 more steps down, he ran a single finger across Sungbae's throat. At Bum's hesitation, he asked, "Do you need help again?" Sungbae whimpered, actually whimpered. Again? Long story. Sangwoo murmured as he shoved Sungbae back to the floor. And you won't have time for it. Moving to a cabinet by the staircase, he pulled out a sharpened kitchen knife, then waved Bum down. For a moment, he looked ready to protest, paralyzed by fear. Sangwoo felt his expression soften and he waved again, slower this time, as if he were trying to tempt a spooked animal. I told you I wouldn't put you down here again, he reminded Bum. But think about my words. Sangwoo huffed, growing impatient. Don't be stupid. He could tell Bum didn't get it, but it didn't matter. Bum had made his way down to him, for a moment even seeming to reach for him, but Sangwoo stopped him by placing the knife in his hand. Do you want me to? Bum pressed his lips together and refused to look at Sangwoo. A fleeting glance towards Sungbae. Then Sangwoo reached out, threading his fingers into Bum's hair. He pulled him closer, smirking satisfied when Bum's face flushed and his breathing grew laboured. It's very easy. Leading the way back to the cowering form on the floor, Sangwoo knelt down. He swallowed a laugh when Sungbae flinched under his touch and continued to look to Bum, tears streaming down his face, still begging for him to stop and to think. Girl or boy, Sangwoo mused silently. They all bleed the same. So, even the high and mighty can fall. Sangwoo mused, waiting for Bum to settle down beside him. He allowed Bum the small comfort to press close to him. Right here, he directed, pressing a finger against the pulsing artery on Sungbae's neck. He's making it easy, getting so worked up.
but it's not going to be immediate, and it'll definitely be messy. Bum took several deep breaths, eyes shut for a moment before fluttering open to look at Sangwoo. "What if you had never found me?" he asked suddenly but no less calmly. The question took Sangwoo by surprise, struck him speechless, the mere idea making his blood run cold. He scowled, wondering if that was a smirk he had seen on Bum's face, but Bum had redirected his attention quickly to Sungbae, murmured another apology before bending to press a chaste kiss on his forehead, and then with impressive determination he drove the knife into the officer's neck. Chapter 10. He'd clean up the body later. The process was rather sloppy, involved lots of cutting, and Bum had done so well. No need to put him through that, yet. In the future, however. Sangwoo paused as he made his way up the stairs, realizing Bum was no longer by his side. Looking back, Bum stared at the first step, breathing hard and fast. "Me first," Bum rasped. Please let me go up first. All the way up, before you come up." Sangwoo arched a brow and considered Bum, confused for a moment before he remembered the last time Bum had been able to walk up and down stairs. He indulged the poor guy just this once. Sangwoo kept his word. If giving into a whim or two of Bum's proved that, it was a harmless endeavour. "Because you were so good," Sangwoo told him as he walked back downstairs and stopped a few feet away. Bum lit up like a light bulb, eyes wide now due to pleasure instead of fear. So he liked being praised. A lot. Sangwoo followed as soon as Bum made it up the stairs. He found him standing still in the middle of the small room, staring blankly at a wall. If he was about to have a moral crisis, Sangwoo didn't really want to be around to put up with it. He also had to consider the living arrangements. He couldn't secure Bum in the basement anymore, and breaking his legs again just seemed... But he couldn't trust Bum. Pursing his lips, Sangwoo decided that could be dealt with when he wouldn't be around to watch Bum. As it was, he was there. Bum wouldn't have a chance. Reaching out to place his hands on his shoulders, Sangwoo ignored the way Bum jumped and pulled back against him. "What do I do with you now?" he mumbled, pressing his face into Bum's hair. Bum seemed to consider his response carefully. That, or it just took him a minute to realize Sangwoo expected a response. "Anything you want, probably." Sangwoo hummed as he contemplated Bum's quiet response. He laughed softly, surprised after he half-heartedly processed his words. "Probably." He pulled Bum closer, wrapping one arm around his shoulder and splaying his other hand across his stomach. A powerful shiver tore through Bum's body. "I'm feeling generous and forgiving," Sangwoo murmured, Bum's hair tickling his lips. Bum twisted and tilted, trying to look up at Sangwoo, his eyes wide with eager and hopeful surprise. "Forgiving? You forgive me?" "I didn't say that. I said I was feeling forgiving," Sangwoo corrected lightly, reaching to flick a strand of hair out of Bum's face. "You sent very provocative videos," he reminded Bum. "You cut me." At least Bum had the decency to look ashamed. What can I do? I am sorry. I was just so mad when you..." Sangwoo allowed Bum to twist around in his arms. "If you keep talking about it, I may become less generous and less forgiving," Sangwoo warned him. Bum cut himself off quickly, lips pressed tight together before he pushed his face into Sangwoo's chest to speak again. "You kept saying you loved me, things like it, but it felt so fake." "Like when you said it?" Sangwoo pointed out. Bum shook his head furiously. "I always meant it, until the last time," he admitted with great reluctance. But Sangwoo appreciated his honesty. "But it hurt, so I thought I needed to make you feel the same way." He risked a glance up at Sangwoo, dark eyes curious, nearly pleading, desperate. Did you?" Sangwoo's answer was immediate. "Probably not." Well, I don't want to run off and fuck the first dumbass who finds me. If I hadn't been worrying so much about you up here by yourself, I would have taken my time with Sungbae." Sangwoo started slowly, speaking carefully so Bum could maybe understand him this time. "Any part of him that had left a mark on you, I would have cut it off, slowly. His tongue, his hands, his..." "Sangwoo!" Bum pulled back, reaching up to clap his hands over Sangwoo's mouth. He stared down at the other man, surprised. After a moment, Bum snatched his hands away like Sangwoo had burned him, an apology on his lips. "Sorry." Sangwoo caught his wrist before he could get too far, confused by his own actions but not totally against them. Sangwoo pulled Bum back and ran his lips across lightly bruised wrists, nothing more than the result of a passionate tryst. He spoke softly after a firm nip to the marred skin. "I want to peel every mark he put on you right off." "Why not make them your own?" Bum whispered, the blush rising to his cheeks fiery and intense. but his expression remained serious. Sangwoo froze, startled by how alike they'd been thinking, then laughed and bent to kiss him. Bum responded like a starving man, grasping his biceps, fingers digging in, rushing the kiss faster and harder than Sangwoo had intended. He found himself yet again having to take a rough grip in his hair, but the real change in his behaviour occurred only after Sangwoo grasped his throat. Not hard, certainly not enough to impede his breathing, but it got his attention. Sangwoo. Bum breathed his name against his lips, shivering under his hands. Sangwoo dug his teeth into Bum's bottom lip until he tasted blood, skin ragged against his own lips. He'd have to talk Bum into investing in chapstick, and maybe get him to stop chewing on his lips. They weren't soft, they were dry and unpleasant, chapped and more likely to bleed. Though, that could be a plus. Sangwoo considered it as he wiped his tongue across Bum's cracked lips, making him hiss and shy away. You'll need to learn not to attack every time I touch you. Bum's hands travelled lower, fingertips ghosting under Sangwoo's shirt, just above his jeans. His apology this time held no weight. Sorry. His body language and content slip of a smile expressing a certain air of satisfaction. He tried to pull away to consider his own brave suggestion, but Bum chased his lips. When he failed that, Sangwoo easily standing straighter, Bum fastened on the closest patch of skin he could reach. Let me... Bum begged, digging his teeth into Sangwoo's collarbone, tugging at his pants. Sangwoo winced, wondering if he should scold Bum for potentially leaving a mark. But he was hard. Probably had been since Bum had taken control of the knife. And with Bum pressing close, even as bony as he was, Sangwoo couldn't really afford to be picky. A simple touch to the top of Bum's head had him falling gracefully to his knees. But it was with steady hands he undid Sangwoo's fly, and with scary determination he jerked Sangwoo's clothes down to mid-thigh. Sangwoo didn't even feel the cooler temperature on his cock before Bum had swallowed him whole. Taken by surprise, Sangwoo yelped as the wet heat of Bum's mouth enveloped him. Dark eyes, swimming with excitement, looked up at him. Bum swallowed around him, pressed his tongue hard against the underside of his cock. Bum was doing much better than the first time he'd done this to Sangwoo. He snapped with unexpected fury at the idea, the knowledge that Bum had done this to someone else. Driving one hand into Bum's hair to hold him back, Sangwoo pulled away, letting the wet tip of his cock paint Bum's lips, which remained eagerly open and hopeful. Bum's hands flew to his thighs, fingers digging in enough for Sangwoo to take notice, and Bum sucked in a ragged breath. I can take it, Sangwoo, I promise, he urged, tone dancing on the line of pathetic desperation. Gritting his teeth, Sangwoo shoved his cock between Bum's willing lips until he felt the soft tissue of Bum's throat around him yet again. Unprepared but far from unable, Bum gagged for a moment, throat convulsing around him and sending a shiver up his spine. If Bum could do that again. Sangwoo fucked his mouth in earnest, holding his head in a tight, unforgiving grip to keep Bum still, taking his pleasure, but noting blatantly that Bum was pressing the heel of his hand against the bulge in his pants. The wispy breaths he managed between thrusts forming soft grunts and hitched gasps. He liked being used like this. Fuck. Sangwoo hissed as he fought to remain upright. The tension in his gut mounted, ready to snap, and the heat in his body flared strong, though still a ways to his release. Sangwoo buried himself in Bum's throat. After a moment he assumed when Bum realized nothing else was coming, watery eyes found his, surprise and shock glittering on the murky depths. Well, keep working, Sangwoo snapped, frowning when his voice came out rough and weak with need. Bum hesitated for a moment, obviously unsure in how to go about doing so, but then he swallowed, his muscles in his throat tightening and fluttering around his cock. And while he had definitely taken Bum's ability to breathe, the boy still used what he had left to groan around him, muffled and vibrating. Sangwoo hissed, his body shaking. Fucking slut. Bum jerked, choked around him, his acceptance fading but only in surprise in his own pleasure. Sangwoo realized when he snatched his hand away from himself and left it shaking hesitantly above Sangwoo's thigh. He shuddered a second later, eyelids fluttering, face flushing darker. The more he choked, his throat tightened unbearably, gaze turning into pleading, tears spilling over, though the flush on his face suggested an emotion other than fear, a momentary resistance when Bum tried to pull away, only to realize it was an exercise in futility. He resigned himself with little grace but enough determination. Sangwoo could kill him like this. Oh shit! Sangwoo reached out, hand slamming against the wall for support as his orgasm pounded through him hard and fast and strong. So unexpected and powerful he saw stars, vision blurring. The sound that ripped from his throat was animalistic and raw, as tight as his body as he fought to remain standing and in control. He held Bum's head closer still, ignoring the small fist that hit his leg twice before laying flat against it, fingers digging in harshly. Sangwoo moaned long and low as he forced his fingers out of Bum's hair, letting him pull back on his own. Bum did so immediately, coughing up what he hadn't been able to swallow, cheeks wet with tears as he struggled for air. Sangwoo watched, dazed body thrumming from the abrupt spend. He was exhausted enough to have to stumble back against the wall and slide down. Both fought to regain their breath and some form of composure. Bum folded over until his forehead hit the floor where he seemed to find a steadier breath, chest no longer heaving as badly. "Sangwoo." Bum's voice rasped out, hoarse and obviously sore. He crawled forward and settled between his knees, the hesitancy Sangwoo had expected non-existent as he propped himself against one leg. He took a breath to continue, but the inhalation resulted in a started cough. Sangwoo found himself so amused by the attempt he actually laughed, soft and indulgent but honest nonetheless. He reached for Bum when he stopped coughing again and pressed his cheeks together, making his swollen lips purse. He laughed again, stronger this time, when Bum tried to frown and his eyebrows drew together. "We'll have to do that again," Sangwoo murmured and brushed the tears from his face, grinning when Bum nodded eagerly and tried to speak his agreement. He wondered if Bum understood that he wasn't simply talking about the sex. Pulling Bum closer, he buried his face in the crux of his neck, closing his mouth over the nearest bruise and digging his teeth in deep. Bum convulsed against him, a startled shout bursting out of him. "Anything, Sangwoo," he hissed, then repeated himself, babbling the words as he buried his fingers in Sangwoo's hair. Sangwoo smiled fondly into his neck, once again completely at ease, relieved and relaxed, indulging in the slip of a man against him. He held Bum closer. There'd be no escaping again. "Anything, Sangwoo. Anything, Sangwoo. Anything, Sangwoo. Anything, Sangwoo. Anything, Sangwoo."